Hello, welcome to Zelf on the Shelf. I, of course, am Tanner.
And I, of course, am Sam.
Samantha, you seem to have got some work done.
Just a little bit, just some touch-ups here and there.
Well, you're looking great. I love the beard.
Thank you.
Zelf
on the Shelf. So this is my dear friend, Sean Cobb.
Got me, not Sam.
So Sean and I were EFY counselors together.
That's right.
And we were good friends at BYU, Idaho. We played in a few bands together. And Sean's just an all-around great human being. And so today we wanted to talk a little bit about our EFY experience, because what a trip, huh?
Yeah, it's quite the unique environment.
Yeah, to say the least. And this is apparently the last year they're doing it. So this is sort of in honor to a final send-off especially for youth. So can you give us just a little overview of the program and how you got involved in it?
Yeah, so EFY is run by, not the church necessarily, but by BYU, right?
Yeah, church education system.
Yeah, so every summer they have all across the United States, and I think a few places outside of the United States, these youth camps, kind of like a normal summer camp, except they're usually in college dorms. Kids like 14 to 18 come in, and the whole week is kind of like an education week, but like they try to make it fun. There's lots of classes. You have a camp counselor. You have like little groups that you're put into, and you do like cheer off, game nights, dances. And then, just a lot of going to classes and picking subjects and having other seminary teachers come in and teach people. So it's just kind of an all-around church education event.
Now, a lot of people are watching this and saying, that sounds like the worst week ever.
Yeah.
So what compels people like you and me to want to participate?
Right, yeah. It wasn't the money, definitely. It wasn't the hours of work. But yeah, as a participant, it is so fun. If you're a believing Mormon kid, you just go and you meet these cool people, and there's girls or boys or just whatever you're into, and it's so fun. And you just kind of idolize these like cool older kids that are teaching you and like showing you the ropes of like how to be a church member. And
looking back, those older kids are kind of a mess.
Yeah, because we have been those older kids, so we know they don't have anything together.
Yeah,
they're falling apart.
It's
they're choosing
easy to be impressive to
teenagers.
teenagers.
Right, yeah. That's why I really like being a counselor, because a lot of people were impressed by where I was at in life.
Basic. Yeah. Basic self-confidence.
Real confidence booster.
Yeah. And, you said it's not done by the church, but there is that idea everywhere in the church education system particularly, that like this trickle-down authority.
Yes.
Well, BYU runs the church education system, and that's owned by the church, so
right.
Therefore everything that happens here is, part of the church. Which can be kind of a conflicting message. I saw some commentary on Twitter about it recently. People were like, it's kind of pretty classist that like they set up this camp as like the thing you gotta do to strengthen your testimony, but it's like pretty expensive, and a lot of people can't go.
$500 or $600 per person.
And a lot of people can't just throw that out. So it kind of sucks that something that's seen as like such an intense testimony building opportunity is not there for everybody, which I think is probably why they're scrapping it and doing a more accessible thing. I hope maybe that's the reason.
Now I remember my parents saying like if we had to like sell a big thing that we own, like if we had to sell a car or something to get our kids to EFY, like we would do it just because it's very good at like indoctrinating kids and getting them switched over to that like Mormon mindset. Yeah. It's also kind of sets you up to accept that in the future if you go to like a church school or something, because like there's that aspect of like you have to like wear a certain dress code, and they're like very strict, like more strict than like any church school, as far as like girls wearing like things covering their knees, or like boys like having a certain haircut, like you're not allowed to have long hair. I remember they would like give you a razor if you showed up with like any kind of facial hair, and you'd have to shave before you could sign in for the week.
Yeah, I remember dudes coming in with like the coolest long hair and
right.
Like, sorry.
Yeah, so I think it kind of sets you up with that mentality, hey, if I do XYZ externally, then that will set me up for like these spiritual experiences I'm about to have.
And like acceptance among peers, because that's kind of how the whole thing is set up.
Yeah.
Is like very much a group dynamic. So, you know, you spend time with all the kids together, and you're going to classes, like you said, and then it kind of climaxes during the Thursday testimony. There's a group singing thing, which, you know, I always felt the spirit the strongest in the group singing, and I look back and I'm like, nah, it's just group singing's like pretty powerful.
Yeah, right.
Like regardless of what you're singing about, or you know, it's really emotional.
Well, yeah, and then Thursday night, like Tanner was mentioning, is the build-up of the week. That's like the spiritual night. You're wearing church clothes throughout the whole day. There's like a special part where they like divide the men and the women, and you go to like a special like teaching class like this just for you.
You just couldn't understand if you don't have a penis. There's just a lot that you will.
And then there's like that testimony night where it's just like very silent. Right before testimony, meaning they do like the most well-known Mormon song that like really inspires everyone. They do like that Sisters in Zion, Armies of Helaman song. And then
Sisters in Zion.
There's kind of like this expectation of silence throughout the rest of the night, except for like whoever's sharing their testimony, and it's
we really like play up the like psychological conditions that lead to this like tension and release.
Yeah.
That's how the emotional breakthroughs happen.
Yeah, and then even there's like this expectation of like you need to get up and you need to say something. And like you even instruct kids beforehand of like what to say. There's like a moment throughout the week where you sit down and open the handbook and you read it with them, and you say like, this is what a testimony is, this is what you can say, this is what you shouldn't say. And some of the things you shouldn't say are like past sins. So they're like almost building in shame to the testimony, meaning of like, you can say the good things, but don't say the bad things. Like, don't say what you've done, because we don't want to hear that. That will take away from the Spirit.
And
so
we'd always get kids who are like, I have a porn addiction.
There's always that one kid, but then you're kind of just taught to feel uncomfortable in that situation instead of just being like, wow, like good for them for opening up and being vulnerable in this like really what is supposed to be a safe environment. But you're kind of taught. I remember feeling really uncomfortable when people talked about that, but you're just conditioned to.
Yeah. And, you know, Sean and I, we met at EFY because we were probably both the most rambunctious counselors. Like the
other counselors are like, guys, let's calm it down. I know we're supposed to be hype men, but like, it's just a job though at the same time. We're like, no.
And, you know, looking back, it was the funnest job I ever had.
No, hands down to this day, still the funnest job I've ever had.
Because even, it's like almost perfect. Because you are showing like genuine love for kids and, you know, being like, who you are is okay here. If you, you know, meet all these external things like you talked about. And so in that, and, you know, with all the stuff at the end, the Thursday meetings, it's like, you know, you've been conforming to all these group expectations and participating in all these group things, and now you get to project like your sense of spirituality, and like there's like an element of like strutting and like I'm going to bear a solid ass testimony.
Right.
Drop a bomb on you motherfuckers.
Even as a counselor, it's kind of like all right, all these kids are gonna say their thing, and then like I'm gonna say my thing as like the priesthood holder. It's so cringy, but that's how it was.
and it did like work emotionally. Like it felt really intense and really good. I felt a lot of love. It was all very genuine, but just like channeled in the weirdest ways.
Right, and I think there's like some aspects of it as well of like the commitment that counselors are putting in. Kind of like the more I'm putting into this, the more I should be getting out of it. And so you kind of like are building yourself up to expect more out of it. And there's like that element of like I'm staying up till 2 a.m. every night to make sure my kids are safe. And like I'm getting up early and I'm like, I don't know, I'm sure other counselors did this, but like I'm not going to watch TV this week because I want to be like more in tune, or I'm going to pray for each one of these kids by name, which is like such a beautiful thing. Like being so concerned about each kid individually, but at the same time, it's like I'm putting so much effort into this. There's no way I'm not gonna get something out.
Right. That if you would do that in like any aspect of life with any relationship, it'd be just as
right.
meaningful.
It's kind of like just a psychological effect that happens to people. I remember doing like a test in school studying psychology. Like, you all have to write, like, I will write this sentence 100 times, and you all write it 100 times, and when you're done, you go turn it into the teacher. And like, one of the times he's like half the group he gave like an extra, like a free quiz. Like, okay, you get 100 on a free quiz for turning this in. And then the other half of the group he gave, you get an extra 10% on one quiz. And like, the quiz are just like don't really affect your grade at all. And the people that, then he had us rate like how we felt about it, like how worth it was it. And the people that got less actually ranked it higher. Because it's like, oh, I wouldn't, in your mind, you don't want to live with that cognitive dissonance of like doing so much and getting so little in return. And not that like I feel like I got so little in return as an EFY counselor, but just like that same aspect of, if I'm putting all this in, for sure whatever I'm getting out is worth it.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast recently, and they brought up Pete Best, the original drummer for the Beatles, and how, like, you know, he's said things to the effect of, like, I'm much happier than I would have been as a Beatle. And it's like, yeah, maybe, probably, like, maybe. And because, like, your brain is wired to have, like, that, I don't know if it's some cost fallacy or whatever it is. Right. It's like, I put in a lot of work, so I'm going to get, like, the most mental oomph out of it as I can.
Right. And I think that for the kids, too, I'm sure they're, like, spending a week somewhere, they don't want to walk away feeling like, oh, that week was useless.
Yeah. Granted, some do. Because the reality is, it's like, there are a lot of kids who don't value that level of conformity and who can sense the inauthenticity of it. It was coming from a place of authenticity. Like, I really did care about the kids, but there was obviously so many, you know, attachments to that and like stipulations and fine print about like what that love was conditional upon that didn't resonate with a lot of kids. And people, I've met up with some kids now who are out of the church, and they said, they're adults now, and they said yeah, it sucked. Like, you sucked. Because you didn't just like love me as a person, you loved me as like what you wanted me to be. And I was like, that's fair.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had any similar things.
Most of the kids I've talked to, like, I already kept in touch with, just because, like, we hit it off on, like, a very personal level. And so, like, the kids I talked to that are now, like, no longer Mormon. We're just still friends. And I was like, no, I had a great time with you. Because, like, I just genuinely had a good time with him as a human. Like, just like, oh, we're just going to be friends for a long time. Like, this is cool.
Yeah.
But, yeah, as far as... Honestly, I did so many years and so many weeks of EFY that, like, there's so many kids I'm like, I don't remember particularly. It's just 30 kids week after week after week for a few years. You just kind of, it blends together after a while. But I think one thing that is really cool is, like you said, with the stipulations of, like, conforming at some point during the week, there is, like, a very open mentality of kind of like whoever you are or whatever kind of personality you have or whatever quirks you have, or if normally you'd be like the unpopular kid in school or not fit in very well, there is like a attitude of acceptance at EFI, which I think is why kids go, because for the first time in their life probably they've been to high school and just like seen the jungle that it is or can be, and then they come to a place where it's just like, oh, it doesn't matter what my hobbies are, it doesn't matter what I dress like or look like or talk like, just everyone is okay and everyone's here with the same goal. I'd like to have fun and like have a spiritual experience
and to meet a cow.
Crush
of the week.
Good Lord.
It was definitely like that for me when I went in high school. Like, you know, I wasn't super cool. I got along with everybody, but I wasn't like the most popular, coolest, whatever. But then going to EFY was like a chance for me to step into my spiritual stature.
Yeah, right.
Like, make that part of my social identity.
And you also could play guitar,
No, I couldn't. Not at that time.
They don't care.
Guitar.
They see someone with a guitar. And
yeah. So let's get like your pros and cons of the experience, and maybe like how you think. Let me see if I'm doing this right. Maybe your vision of what could like really be the most meaningful? Like, if you could do it your way.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Unless there's, like, maybe a different direction.
No, that's great. So, like I said, like, the good things about EFY was, like, the acceptance of people. I think you could go a little further as far as, like, accepting people who aren't conforming. So just creating, like, a space where everyone can be themselves, and be open and not judging. And I think, like, practicing that as, like, a 14-year-old would be just such an amazing leg up on life. Like, getting that experience in and, like, feeling that acceptance and then, like, practicing it towards other people. I think that's, like, a really beautiful thing that is kind of lacking in most people's, like, transition from being, like, a child, like, into adulthood. Mm-hmm. So I think having that behind your, like, just, like, having that experience on your back is super amazing. I think they're kind of taking advantage of those, like, beautiful things in life and just cramming them into that Mormon box. Mm-hmm. So I think it'd be really cool. And actually, I've had friends, like, talk about, like, you know, one day doing this, but starting something similar to EFY, but having it be more about mental health, meditation, mindfulness, good communication skills. I think focusing on those things that are really going to just help you become the best version of yourself and help you interact in, like, with the world around you, but also a place to be vulnerable as a high school student and to be accepted and not have that fear of how's this going to make me look or, like, what are my friends going to think, but just being in a place where you can be open and kind of explore who you are with some guidance from older people who may or may not know what they're doing either.
Mm-hmm. So how does somebody like you, who, you know, because the idea is that the EFY is this, like, vortex of spiritual power, and that the people who are involved in it are obviously very committed to the church and to the gospel and things. So how does somebody like you, who's so into that, and obviously, like, I'm sure people watching this can tell, like, you're a sincere, caring person, you're there for the right reasons. How does somebody like you now become a bearded apostate?
It was actually just the beard. I broke a razor, and my beard started growing out, and I looked in the mirror, and I was like, this is sinful, but I'm enjoying it. And after that, I was just drinking, and, you know, it's just,
cords of iniquity.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So just keep that beard short. The longer it got, the smaller my testimony was. Exactly. I think it was pulling that energy. Yeah. No, so realistically, Tanner was kind of my first eye-opening, just, like, kind of opened that questioning door for me as far as being raised and believing Mormon. Having known him at BYU Idaho and, like, knowing you as an EFY counselor and, like, having that dynamic and, like, becoming friends in that environment, obviously, like, knew Tanner was a very sincere and, like, authentic person. He wasn't, like, there just to make a quick buck. He wasn't there to, like, waste his summer. Like,
no bucks.
Yeah, just, you know, this really, really quick bucks. They just come and go. But seeing him go through his faith transition and being open about it kind of was like, all right, well, I know Tanner's not one of these evil apostates I've learned about. He's not that person that would be easily tricked. I knew he studied, like, really thoroughly. So I was kind of
the thralls of my faith crisis the last year.
Right, just I saw him out on the balcony every night just till the morning time, just reading church approved material, and so I was like, well, there's something to this. If he was just so honestly searching, like, to strengthen his testimony around whatever it may be, and came out this way, like, what's the difference? Like, what am I missing? And so I started toying with my worldview a little bit here and there, and, like, Mormonism stopped becoming, like, so black and white for me. There's a lot more gray, and I was teaching seminary at the time, and I was teaching the Old Testament, and so, like, as I was, like, reading these insane stories and, like, teaching them to these kids, kind of like an EFY counselor, and trying to, like, derive meaning from them, I realized, like, this is not as easy as I think it is. Like, if I'm looking at this, like, more objectively and just, like, with a more questioning mind, like, it's a lot harder to justify these beliefs. Mm-hmm. And I'd have, you know, the kind of not so Mormon kid raise a hand like, well, I drink coffee sometimes. Is that bad? And I was like, I think I'm supposed to say yes, but I just can't anymore. Like that seems so ridiculous to label that good or bad. Like it's just a beverage. And just other things like that, just like the insane stories of the Old Testament, people being killed for nothing, or the genocide or whatever it may be, and having to like justify that to these kids. And so I started diving in more and more to church history and the research and the CES letter, and at a certain point I just was like...
You were like teaching seminary.
Right, at the time. So once I read the CES letter, that kind of just like shotgun, like stacked after stacked after stacked of information that I just couldn't keep refuting if I was applying like any level of logical critique to it. So at that point I just kind of was like, I don't know what to do. I was super devastated. Obviously that faith transition can be pretty rough. I felt like my identity as a human was no longer valid. Like I just was like, who am I? All I have known my whole life from the time I was born has been building these bricks of who I am as a Mormon, with this certain worldview. So once that was gone, I just was kind of like, well, I guess I'm starting over from scratch and let's see what happens. And honestly, life has been really cool ever since. Not perfect. There's been a lot of hard times still, but overall it's just kind of opening from a small worldview, like looking through a pinhole, to just taking that away and seeing the world kind of through fresh eyes. It's been really beautiful, and been able to like sift through the mess of my history and like church beliefs and kind of pick out like what things came from where and which things are good and how to relabel them or like reorganize them, and just kind of like this, like picking the good things out of EFY and like what made it a positive experience and like how we can recreate that without having to like pigeonhole it.
Maybe let's talk quick about your like spiritual paradigm now. You have most of our audience is fairly young.
Yeah.
So maybe offering folks some ideas about how to approach spirituality after.
Well, just like we were talking about the other day, there is like certain aspects of being raised religious that I like really appreciate. One of them being like the ability to find connections in the world around you. Like in Mormonism, it's really common, especially as EFY counselors, like we're almost trained in this.
Literally are trained
in
this.
At EFY you would play a game, just some silly game, like some silly little party camp game, and then you would sit down and be like, okay, what did we learn from that? How can we apply this to the gospel? But now you can kind of do that. I feel like I can do that in like a more open and fun way almost, and like exploring the world around me and like finding things that are synchronized, or seeing the patterns in my brain that like, why am I like creating these patterns in this situation, and like kind of step back and observe it more and just appreciate it for what it is, and finding little meanings in life here and there in different situations. So I really appreciate that I was kind of trained to do that, because I feel like it adds depth to my life.
Yeah, Mormons can connect any two
Yeah.
like non-related principles or objects.
Or on a mission, we played that
from
game,
it.
like you draw like part of a lesson out of one bag and you draw like a random object out of another bag, and you're like, hey, use this fork to teach about baptism, and you're like, all right, let's do this.
It's an interesting exercise
Yeah.
in like abstract connection.
Right, yeah. Listen, the last recording.
Well, it went out on there. That's really the thing. Maybe let's... where's a good place to go back to? Or even... maybe say just on the mission, like when we used to...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so one thing, like even on the mission, we would have like a game we play where there's like gospel principles in one bag, so you'd like draw one out, and then like a random object, like a fork in the other bag, you draw it out, and then you have to like be like, this is how the fork is about baptism. You have to relate the two. And
how do you fork out a baptism? I don't
you just gotta keep forking them out, you know what I mean?
If you can make those connections, you're just about to go clear. You gotta figure it out, master teacher. Well, we've talked a bunch about it, and it's amazing to go from a paradigm where, everything is so like fabricated and like if fast food is the meta, like,
right,
the metaphor
yeah.
that comes to mind, I think that you used the other day, that's like, you know, everyone gets this really uniform meal that's not necessarily, it tastes good a lot of the times, it's not necessarily good for you all the time, it'll keep
right.
you alive, and
yeah.
and then going and realizing that there's like so many more options out there, and that you get to find out what really resonates with you, and that's a really cool experience. And
yeah, you've kind of been like conditioned that this like fast food is the best food there is, and it's the only food, and like all the other foods are like, they have good things, right, but this is the best. And then you go out and like start exploring, you're like, it's almost like a limitless reopening of life.
Mm-hmm. Last thing before we end, do you have any like horror stories or from EFY? Horror or memorable?
I wouldn't say there's like particular horror stories. Overall, like I said, like the best job I had, like the funnest job. I guess the regrets are those moments where like I saw someone trying to be non-conforming, and like my goal became for them to conform. My goal became for them to get the experience that I wanted them to have out of it, or like to have the experiences I've had, and just like not allowing them to just like exist as who they are, and trying to like just make them into what I thought they should be. I mean, that's just part of leaving a cult, is the regrets.
Yeah, they never tell you about the regrets.
Right.
If you leave the church, you're going to have so many regrets about stupid shit you said, so don't leave.
But I think what's so great about social media, though, is like now it can kind of publicly come out, and like I'm pretty open. I'm not on or post on social media a lot anyways, but like I'm fairly open about like where I'm at with the church and like where I'm at in life.
And where you're at is Rexburg, Idaho.
Don't remind me.
I say that so maybe someone watching this can be like, oh,
there you go. Yeah, I'm in
that.
Rexburg. Hang out. Give me a call. But yeah, I think that is like a blessing, or like a a good thing in my life. Is that like I'm able to reach out, and I've found like multiple EFY kids who have like come out to me, or like come to me and just like, hey, I'm in this situation, and to me it's like I'm glad I'm there for them. I'm glad I can help guide other people through this experience of leaving a high demand religion like Mormonism. And so if you're my EFY kid and you stumble upon this, shoot me a message. Happy to talk to anybody, anytime, about anything, really.
It doesn't have to be about Mormon.
Yeah.
Let's talk sports ball.
Did you just catch a sports ball game last night, actually?
I've got several games.
Yeah.
Just directly.
Yeah.
All my screens.
That one team that was winning, that was cool.
I
Except for if you're for the other team.
I hate
they lost. Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you so much, Sean, for talking a little bit.
Oh man,
for sure.
It's just cool to be with Zelf on the shelf. You know what I mean?
Yeah. God. All my actual friends who like people are like, you know Zelf, and they're like, he's not that great. Chill out. Thank you so much. Love you all. You're loved just the way you are. No need to, try to fit someone else's expectations or standards of what they think a good person ought to look or sound like.
Absolutely.
Great, just the way you are, as Mr. Rogers says. Love you. Have a good one. Tell us your EFY stories in the comments below.